This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Ahead of us today on this Wednesday's program, we start off with Roger McEowen of K-State and Washburn University's School of Law. He talks about foreign land ownership concerns and how legislators in Indiana are getting involved. Also ahead, K-State Extension Water Specialist Jonathan Aguilar discusses his latest work with the Irrigation Innovation Project and an upcoming field day opportunity for producers to learn more about water conservation and irrigation. We end with this week's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts, where the experts answer what they believe are the best practices for heat management. That and more awaits us ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We're going to be covering another law-related piece with K-State and Washburn University School of Law's Roger McEowen. So, Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Samantha.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be covering a topic that has to do with foreign ownership of agricultural land. And this has recently become a concern and has actually led to some legislation, from what we understand.
Well, that's true. It seems the concern level has picked up, of course, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. More states have started looking at foreign ownership, but actually it's been on the radar for quite some time. At the federal level, since 1978, we have had the Foreign Investment Disclosure Act that Congress enacted back in 78. And under that law, that really only does one thing. It's an information gathering statute that requires foreign individuals and businesses to report ownership information to the United States when they acquire or transfer an interest in ag land, or when any interest in ag land is held by a foreign person on the day from the start of the effective date of the act forward. And when a non-foreign owner of ag land becomes a foreign person, so if you change your citizenship, there's a reporting requirement. And then when non-ag land owned by a foreign person becomes ag land, so if it gets changed in its status from non-ag to ag land, then there's a reporting requirement. But that has no teeth in it, so to speak, in terms of prohibiting foreign ownership. It just says we're going to monitor who these people are. Mm-hmm. Well, states picked up on that too, and in fact there are 11 states that have some sort of restriction on foreign ownership, and that goes back into the 1970s also. So it's not a new issue, but it has picked up in some states because of concerns about the percentage of foreign ownership of agricultural land in this country.
Absolutely. And one of the states as of recently is Indiana. Is that correct?
It is. There was a bill that became law earlier this year in Indiana that is designed to restrict, to an extent, foreign ownership in agricultural land and make sure they monitor it more closely.
It's outlined that bill doesn't include food or national security as concerns, but that's kind of the basis behind why this bill was even thought of.
Well, that really is the core reason why we have legal restrictions on foreign ownership of agricultural land. We don't want, from a policy standpoint, individuals that are not loyal to the United States, or individuals that want to do us harm, or countries that want to do us harm, owning our food base. And that really at its core is the reason for these legal restrictions. And indeed, from a historical standpoint, there's a lot of political and power struggle in the world that comes down to who controls the food supply. I'm not sure a lot of people realize that, but if you get your hands on the American food supply chain, you can really mess up a lot of stuff. And that is really the core reason why we have these restrictions, and why more and more states are starting to look at this and see what they have on their books and that they don't have anything to create some sort of restriction.
When we think of some of these foreign landowners that actually invest in ag land in the United States, who are some of those major contributors?
China. China, in the last decade or so, has really come to the forefront in terms of what they're doing in buying up agricultural land. I've been contacted by attorneys that are working on behalf of firms that are interested in selling to Chinese. We've had the Chinese acquire various, Smithfield Farms would be one of those. So pork production in this country, along with the land associated with that. China might be buying it for investment purposes. Ag property is a great investment, but the more land of ours that they own, as a foreign Chinese business entity, they could just allow basically anybody to produce crops on that land if they wanted to, and so that's why we have some concerns. China doesn't necessarily like us. Russia doesn't like us. There are countries in the Mideast that have professed hatred toward us. We don't want those countries necessarily owning our food base. Once they get control of that, that could cause us great harm. So that's why there's that concern where we have more and more of these countries that express hatred to us, and they many times are getting singled out in state house discussions on these laws, and that was indeed the case in Indiana earlier this spring.
Sure. And I know that a concern is that the purchasing of this agricultural land will lead to almost tripling, in some cases, land prices in the past decade alone, some data has shown. Yeah,
that is a real issue that's out there, and in terms of pricing out our own farmers from buying land out of the market. This is an issue that came up a number of years ago, about 30 years ago, when I was in private practice in Nebraska. In that instance, in the Sandhills in Nebraska, Ted Turner, who is a media mogul, was buying up Nebraska ranch land and was driving up the price for property tax purposes under the Nebraska property tax system. It's based on sale data. Well, if you've got sales that are out of whack, that was getting factored into that base, and it was driving up the property tax base for farmers unduly, farmers and ranchers across Nebraska. They've since changed the system so that we measure property values for property tax a little bit different in Nebraska. But there have been recent stories in the news about the former Microsoft owner or current Microsoft owner, Bill Gates, buying up enormous amounts of farmland, and you're seeing that same concern cycle back again. What's this going to do to land values? Is it unduly pricing farmers out of the market, farmers and ranchers? So there are those concerns in addition to the foreign ownership concern, but they really come back to the same thing, and that issue is what's it doing economically? And then you throw on the foreign owner, what's it doing in terms of faithfulness to the country? Are these people going to abide by our laws, or are they trying to get control of our food system? So politicians have a lot of things in the mix to think about when they legislate in this area.
Absolutely. And even, when you think about the local level of what the purchasing of this land can do, a lot of times these local businesses are very connected to their local economy and the people that they're surrounded by.
That's right. The foreign entities are not connected to the local communities, so they're not beholden to support local retailers and service companies. And also, they may have not a great deal of incentive to follow environmental regulations. So we've got a whole host of concerns on that front too. We get to the issue then of, well, how big of a problem is this? And according to the USDA data that's out there at the end of 2020, foreign investors had an interest in almost 40 million acres of U.S. ag land. I think the number was 37.5 million, around in that category. And it's really ramped up in recent years. From 2009 to 2015, the holdings increased an average of 800,000 acres per year. But since 2015, that rate of growth has accelerated to about 2.2 million acres annually. And so, again, that's putting pressure on legislators to say, hey, we think we need to take a look at this and see what, if anything, needs to be done from a legislative standpoint.
When you think of those numbers, like you mentioned, that's a big deal. That's a lot of agricultural land. And it's not only local legislators now that are concerned. There's also rumors that Congress is considering legislation that would limit this.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the open, we do have the Foreign Disclosure Act that goes back to the late 1970s, but that's just a reporting requirement. Mm-hmm. There is talk in the Congress about putting some type of foreign ownership restriction in federal law in addition to what the states might have. And there's only 11 states that have restrictions. So they're looking at an overlying federal restriction on foreign ownership in addition to the reporting requirement. That reporting requirement is viewed to, it doesn't restrict anything, and it's just trying to keep track of who owns what. But many are thinking it's time to move forward with restrictive type legislation.
Absolutely. Well, Roger, as always, we thank you for your time and for bringing up these pertinent topics that producers tuning in should be interested in and should be following up to. But if producers are wanting more information regarding this case specifically and this legislation, where can they find that at?
On my blog, I've written about this issue in the past, and that can be accessed through my homepage, which is washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. And the blog is down the left side of the homepage. And then once people are on there, they can do a search under the category of regulatory law, and it's kind of scroll back through what I've written, and they'll be able to find it. A general internet search with my name and blog and foreign ownership of agricultural land might be able to pull it up too.
You also contributed commentary for the Indiana Lawyer. They recently did a post on this as well, so we'll link that and your website in the show notes of today's episode. But as always, again, we thank you, Roger. That was Roger McEowen. He is the K-State and Washburn University School of Law's Ag Law professor, contributing for this week's Ag Law Update. Still ahead of us today on Agriculture Today, for this week's piece on water conservation, we have Jonathan Aguilar. He is a K-State Extension Specialist whose area of work focuses specifically on irrigation. And we will hear from him shortly about his work with the Irrigation Innovation Project and an upcoming field day that he and his team will be hosting. So stay tuned for that and more ahead on Agriculture Today. Welcome back to Agriculture Today. We have with us now Jonathan Aguilar. He is a K-State Extension Specialist, specifically in irrigation. So, Jonathan, I know you're coming to us from Garden City over the phone, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, greetings from Garden City. We are still waiting for the rain out here, but we are really very excited to be part of this program.
I've mentioned in previous programs that the month of July, I really want to focus a little bit more on water conservation. And, of course, a key part of that in agriculture has to do with how we handle irrigation. So today you're going to be speaking with us about the Irrigation Innovation Project that you are spearheading. So tell us a little bit about that.
Regarding the project that we are involved, it is a conservation innovation grant that was funded by the NRCS. We were lucky to be working with the Nature Conservancy, who is the lead agency here in this project. But we are also excited to be able to share that expertise and activities with our colleagues and farmers in the Rattlesnake Watershed Creek area. We are doing this in support of what they are doing there already in terms of the water conservation. But we know we always are looking for something better to do. So in this particular innovation grant project, we are looking at to better improve their efficiency and their management of the water in that region, particularly that they are in this region where there's a lot of competition between the water use, both from the domestic, from the agriculture, as well as from the services for the environment. And I think we are really excited about it. Whatever we could do to be able to help them out, improve their water efficiency and water use. We know that water is really a very important resource actually wherever you are, and so we are giving them an opportunity to see what else they could possibly do in their operation.
Absolutely. And in terms of working with local producers, I love when research kind of aligns itself with that. What has that experience been like?
it is really very fulfilling to be able to put the research out and into the farmers' operation and field. So one thing that we were really excited about this project is that this is actually part of an outcrop of what we have restarted before, the water technology farms. There was a participant on this area that tried several types of irrigation technologies in his farm, and I think we learned from that experience from the ILS farm, and we were able to catapult from that results this project of innovation grant, particularly in the greater area of the rattlesnake watershed area. So one of the things that we are testing, or actually having the farmers try, is an improved irrigation application systems. So they probably are doing already something in their field, but we would like them to test things that are still in the market and maybe are better suited for their operation. One of those items is the mobile drip irrigation, which is something that some of the farmers are testing in their farms. The other is just the management itself. Do they turn on and off, or when do they turn on and off their system if it rains? Mind you, even if it is very dry, particularly in the time of July, we still get those thunderstorms and we still get those rain, which is beneficial rain in most cases. And when they are faced with the rain, one of the big questions that they probably have is, do I have to turn off my system, or after the rain? The question is, when do I get back and irrigate again? So that is something that we are trying to help the producers in that region.
Excellent. Well, I know that this has been the first year of your program, so post this first year of the project actually going on, what has really excited your team the most?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have really learned, which was not actually the main objective of the project, but was really very beneficial for the region, was knowing that some of their systems need some adjustment to become more efficient. What I mean about that is that some of the systems that they were operating, they thought were already in their full capacity or the most efficient way. But one of our technical engineer that was going around with the participants found out that his name is Lee Wheeler. He found out that some of the systems were not operating at the optimum operation, so not maximizing the efficiency of the system. So just a little adjustment, for example, in the bowl setting, or in the ratio of their pulley, or in their adjustment of their throttle. So those are the things that were found to be just a few adjustments could actually increase their efficiency by 10 to 15%. The other thing is just the pressure from the pump to the end of the system. What we are finding out is that some of them were not at the optimum pressure. So that means that their system, or their irrigation system, they probably are not putting enough water, or their pump, since they have low pressure or inadequate pressure, then probably some of their portions of their fields may not be getting adequate amount of water, whereas the other parts are getting enough. Mm-hmm. So those are just a few adjustments that we found were really exciting for the producers.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, it's funny how those small things that might go unnoticed actually make a big difference in the long run. So that's great.
Yep. So those are small items, and I think the big thing about also this project is that now the farmers are more keen about how they operate. As I mentioned before, just the decision making of when to turn it on and when to turn it off was actually very key in this operation.
As a result of this project and the success you guys are seeing and the results that you've gotten so far, you guys are going to have an upcoming field day. Is that correct?
That is correct. So July 22nd, to be exact, we are going to invite producers out in the field to learn not only from us who are part of this project, but also from the producers themselves. We have lined up a panel of producers so that it's not just from our words, but actually from their words and how they were able to learn from this project. Maybe some of what I am telling right now may not be actually true. And so I would like them to hear it directly from the farmers who are participating in this project. So on July 22nd, we will be inviting producers to come out to one of the fields of our participant, about a few miles west of St. John, to come out and learn from their colleagues, from their peers, from their fellow farmers about what they would probably be able to implement in their field. Other than that, we have also invited some of the technology partners because not always that they know all of the technologies that are going on. So this is also an opportunity for them to be able to reach out and talk with these technology providers in their locality to be able to see if some of these technologies could be implemented in their field. Again, this is an open to everyone, open invitation. And the best part is that there will be some free food. So I think one of the items that we are talking about is a cinnamon roll. So feel free to come out and in the field and listen and learn. And while you are having a good, nice taste of cinnamon rolls and other goodies that we will be providing during that field day.
Nothing quite entices people to come to events quite like food does, huh, Jonathan?
That's right. And actually, when we were having this planning session, one of the things that we were making sure that we have are food and coffee.
Excellent.
So make sure that you visit us during that field day, because we will try to provide as much as possible coffee and food that you could enjoy while learning as well.
Food, coffee, and then pertinent information. That's the way to a farmer's heart, that's for sure. So, Jonathan, if producers are listening and they're like, well, I want to register for this event. This sounds like it'll be a great time and it'll be an opportunity that they'll want to take advantage of for sure. Where can they register?
Yeah, so we are, as I mentioned, we are still on the planning stage, but definitely you will get to hear more from your local extension offices, as well as the GMD5, and as well as also from the NRCS. So we are trying to line up everything yet as of the moment, but more information are coming out soon. So we will also be coming out with a press release very soon that may have also the link for when to RSVP, because we would like to make sure that we've got enough food for you. So please RSVP so that we will not be leaving anybody behind in terms of the food.
We'll put out another bit of information once we've got that from Jonathan here on Agriculture Today. So stay tuned for that information. And then, Jonathan, if producers are tuning in and they want to learn more about your Irrigation Innovation Project, is there a place that they can find that information?
Yes, right now it's going to be on the GMD5. We will also post something on the mylab.ksu.edu, so milab.ksu.edu, and some other extension websites later on. So we'll try to get that as much as possible out for you.
Excellent. Well, we'll have those resources, as always, in the show notes of today's episode, which can be found on agtoday.net. So be sure to check those out. And, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much also for this opportunity. And again, we're hoping for more rain in this area.
Once again, that was Jonathan Aguilar. He is a K-State Extension Irrigation Specialist. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today, and to round out today's programming on this Wednesday, we have this week's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts.
Welcome to the Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. This comes to you from faculty here at Kansas State University from both the College of Agriculture and the College of Veterinary Medicine. Happy to have several experts here with me today. We'd like to answer your questions each week, so you can email us at bci@ksu.edu or reach out to us at @_BCI on Twitter. Today's experts here with me are Dr. Brian Lubers, who does food animal therapeutics. Welcome, Brian.
Hello.
Dr. Philip Lancaster, who does nutrition.
Hello.
And Dr. Bob Larson, who's a veterinarian.
Good to be here.
And our format for this is we're going to discuss, each of them will have a few seconds to give their answer to the question, and then the value of their answer, we'll give a few points assigned to that, and then at the end, they'll get a chance to respond. Our question today is on heat management, and the question is, what can I do to help my herd get through some of the heat events and heat seasons? Brian, I'll ask you to go first.
I think the number one thing is shade. Getting animals
out of the sunlight. So especially we get black-hided animals, they absorb that radiation and they just simply can't cool down. Obviously, in confined operations, we can provide temporary shade that covers a small area and covers most of the cattle. When we get out into extensive grazing operations, a lot of times that'll be trees or natural shade. If you have pastures that don't have natural shade, you might have to provide some temporary shading or just manage your rotational grazing a little bit differently, where when we have these heat events, the cattle are in the pastures with the most trees.
Excellent. Bob?
Well, I'm going to come up with water. Cattle intake of water goes up greatly depending on temperature. So when we're talking about temperatures of 90 degrees or higher, those types of situations, it's easy for adult cattle to need at least 20 gallons of water per day. For stocker cattle or something like that, a little bit lighter, it's still going to be 15 to 20 gallons a day. So a lot of water. So there's two aspects of that. One is just prior planning, making sure that you have plenty of access to water. So quantity, whether it's a pond or well, do you have enough water capacity? And then kind of delivery capacity and delivery ease for the cattle. So you got to make sure the footing is good, that there's plenty of space. And a lot of that has to be done ahead of time because you're talking about maybe creating better places for the cattle to water, bringing in bigger tanks, those type of things. But if you get into an emergency situation, you're going to have to bring in water for a short term. And that's something, it's a lot of work over a short term, but you might have to do that.
Philip?
From a nutrition aspect, it's not so much what we can do, but it's just realizing how the cattle are going to change. So their grazing patterns are going to change due to the heat. They're going to start grazing a lot earlier in the morning. They're going to graze later in the evening. They're not going to be nearly as active during the day. Another thing, if you're supplementing those cattle, you might want to think about when you're delivering supplement because unless you're going to deliver it close to where the cattle are loafing and shaded up, they're not going to come up to eat. And so that feed may sit there in the bunk and get hot, maybe get a little bit stale. And so we may want to get out there really early in the morning to deliver feed or later in the evening.
Excellent. Thanks, Philip. So everybody gave a good answer to that. Brian's answer focused on shade. Do you have anything else you want to add after the other two?
Particularly with shade or any topic?
Any topic.
Yeah, I think timings, Philip mentioned timing, and I'll mention timing, not just feeding timing, but if you have to do any procedures with the cattle, timing early in the day.
Bob?
The only thing I might bring up is water quality. We don't know as much about water quality as we do quantity, but it probably matters. And so when I say water quantity, I'm assuming a decent quality type of water.
Philip?
Well, I think I'll go along with Bob's saying. If we're using a stock pond or something like that, they can get pretty dry this time of year and get pretty mucky and things like that. And so that water quality can be pretty poor this time of year.
Excellent. Okay, so final scores that I've tallied up, Brian got an 8 out of 10 for providing helpful information on shade. Bob would have had an 8, but he went overtime, unsurprisingly, which is going to cost him 2 points. So he ended up with a 6. And Philip ended up right in the middle with a 7. So your final scores are Bob 6, Philip 7, and Brian 8. So thank you for joining us. If you have any other questions you'd like us to answer, you can always email us at bci@ksu.edu.
That was the Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts, a new weekly segment here on Agriculture Today. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back with more tomorrow. For Agriculture Today, I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network.